We are 4B, about 9 lines from the bottom. Amalei Ravina. So, so yesterday we concluded that we distinguished between klal upradu klal and ribui miud and ribui, and we demonstrated that Rabbi holds ribui uses the ribui umiut, but now we're going to challenge that. Only Ravina Lamemar. Rabbi Darish Ribuye Mute. Does Rabbi really use this method? For Rabbi Klal Uprati Darish, she takes the second approach of Klal Uprati Klal. Tanya, what's the proof? Is a brisa, martzea. So when you want to keep when a Eved Ivri wants to be kept beyond the 6 years term, then the master drills a hole in his earlobe. And the Torah says use a martzea, an awl. Ainly el martzea, so it has to be, sounds like it has to be an awl. But what about what about using other tools like a sharp piece of wood, a thorn, a needle, or whatever, a pen, or whatever these other things are? Can use any tool. Take the martzea. So take means take anything, and the martzea is just an example. Anything, any hand tool. Divrei Rabbi Yossi Rabbi Huda. Rabbi says martzea. No, it can't be any tool. It has to be like a martzea, like an awl, just as an awl is made of metal. So you can use any metal tool, but not these other things, wood or whatever. Okay, so what's the dispute between Rabbi and Rabbi Yosi Rabbi Huda? Rabbi Darish Klalu Prate. Rabbi uses the Klalu Prat method, so it has to be something like the Prat, like the Marseya, in that it's metal. For Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Huda Darish, but Rabbi Yossi uses the other approach, Ribuye Mute, meaning it includes any other thing, not just a Marseya, but any other tool. So it looks like Rabbi is clearly using the Klalu Prat method. Where's this in? That's true. Bialma Klalu Prati Darish. In general, Rabbi uses that method. Vahacha, but in our Mishnah, in the case of the Bechor, in the Brisa we were dealing with, in the case of the Bechor, why does he use Ribuye Mu'ute? Kedatana Dre Rabbi Shmuel, Kedatana Dre Rabbi Shmuel, B'mayim Shnei Pamim. Why does it say this is regarding fish, right? What are kosher fish? Anything in the water. And it says mime in the water that swims in the water. It says it twice. This is not a klal thing. Al ribo mia. This is meaning like anything in the. It's talking about any aquatic, any fish species, anything in the water, and so that's where we see that that generally uh, um, so this is an example of where the two general terms, mayim, appear before the detail, and so with the Bechor, it's the case as well. So that's where Rabbi makes an exception. V'Rabbanan. So why do the rabbis argue with Rabbi? Even about the Bechor, that they even there they say Kal Prat. Ravina Kadem like they say in the West in Eretz Yisrael, Kol Makom Shata Moses Sheiklos Hasmuchos Elazeh, wherever you find two general terms in a row, Hatel Prat Beinehem, and there's a specification, a detail afterwards, make it as if the detail is in the middle. To do Klal Prat, and do it like a Klal Prat. So they reject this idea that if the Prat comes after the two klals, that it's treated differently. No, they say it's the same as Klal Prat or klal. So Hashad Yamar Rabbi Klali Prashid Arish. Okay, so now you said in general that Rabbi in general uses Klalu Prat. Balkarche Chasha Shavuos. So then our Mishnah is against that, right? In our Mishnah about Shavuos, It does not. It does not agree with the Mishnah, and the Mishnah is written by Rebbe, right? The Stam Mishnah is written by Rebbe. El b'shuas nasiv liba to Rebbe Kiva. So how are we going to answer that? We're going to say that in our Mishnah, Rebbe's not expressing his own opinion. He is citing Rabbi Akiva's opinion. The Layla Sfirle, but Rebbe doesn't hold this. Okay, so that's like the last resort of when the Gemara can't explain the attribution of the Mishnah. They'll say, or as they do in this case, that yes, this is a Stam Mishnah, but it's not Rebbe expressing his own opinion. He's citing Rabbi Akiva.
But we learned where is it? How do we get to Rebbe? Yesterday we had a whole discussion that the Mishnah could not be like Rebbe Akiva because of one of the four things, whether it was Tameh or so that's why we defaulted to Rebbe. Now if you say the Mishnah holds like Rebbe Akiva, but the Rebbe holds like Rebbe Akiva, then that negates that whole discussion.
I'm not sure. I think Rabbi Akiva holds that the carbon applies to all four types of shuos, even shuos that are about things that occurred in the past.
No, there was one that didn't work. I forget. I think it was either
I think
Tameh.
we tried to attribute that to Rabbi Akiva, but we didn't end up there. We're ending up saying that Rabbi Akiva, that our Mishnah does hold like Rabbi Akiva, or is in accordance with Rabbi Akiva, and not like Rabbi Shmuel.
No, there was one. There were these four things. There was what a Shevuot and Tameh and what the other and Shabbat and whatever. And so one of them, I don't remember, was a problem for Rabbi Akiva, and the other one was a problem for Rabbi Yishmael. And so therefore, we went to a whole Shaklevatari and said, no, okay, the Mishnah's like Rabbi,
Right.
and
Right. So
so
we're
now
saying
we
so
do
the whole
Shana.
Mishnah exactly. So the whole Mishnah doesn't have to be like Rabbi Akiva, but the first clause about Shavuos can be like Rabbi Akiva. So I mean, it's weird, right? It's a pretty desperate attempt to reconcile. But what we're saying is that Rabbi is the author of the Mishnah, but he's picking and choosing in the different cases of who he's gonna quote in this Mishnah.
Who's going to quote if we say that? But we're
Or not who he's going to quote, but whose view he is going to put forth in the Mishnah. So it's very weird, right? But what we're saying is that with regard to Shavuos, he is relying, or he is citing Rabbi Akiva's opinion. And with
uh,
regards to the other ones, he may not be Rabbi Akiva. So, like, we couldn't say that the whole Mishnah was like Rabbi Akiva, but we're saying that the Mishnah is written by Rabbi, and he's picking and choosing regarding the different cases that he's talking about which Tana he's going to cite.
oh,
It's very kind of unsatisfactory, but it does have the advantage of allowing you to like not be forced into contradictory views of the various Tanaim.
so in the end, we are saying the Mishnah is like Rebbe, but on some part of it, he holds like Rabbi Akiva. Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
no, we're saying he doesn't hold like it. He's citing this view in his Mishnah, even though he doesn't agree with it, which is even a little stranger, right?
He's citing the view of Rabbi Akiva regarding
From
Shavuot.
Shavuos. Yes, exactly.
But so then who's the author of the Mishnah? Whose Mishnah is it? Rebbe? Is it Rabbi Akiva? Rebbe? And then
Rabbi is the author of the Mishnah, but he is not. But saying in this case, usually when we say who's the author of the Mishnah, we mean whose view does this accord with, right? But here we're saying Rabbi is the author of the Mishnah, even though this part of the Mishnah doesn't accord with his own view.
that's a little strange.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree. But otherwise, that's the only way the Gemara could find and Charles points out this is not unique in Shas, that's true, but that's the only way the Gemara could, using its own principles, could arrive at a conclusion where everyone's stated opinion is intact and not contradictory across different Mishnayos. That's yes, I agree with you. It's very it's weird, but that's the only way the Gemara could find to resolve the apparent contradictions. Sometimes the Gemara resorts to, oh well, just say the opposite, right? Like the opinions are misattributed, and we have to revise our view of who holds what. I mean, that's also a little
Right.
unsatisfactory. So, that's um, that's a larger question, which I can't really answer because I don't know how to answer it. Like, why does the Gemara use this methodology? Okay, Gufa. Um, we are reviewing what we said before. Minayin she'ena chayvela al sheyesh v'yediya v'tchila v'yediya v'sof v'helen ben time. Um, so this was talking about what? About um, vanilla mimenu hu yadav Hashem, right? The case of
There's an awareness before, and then he
yeah,
forgets,
but
and then he wears
regarding
it.
what?
I think it was regarding was it
The
Talmud when
korban.
he was eating Talmud? He was in the Beit
Oh
HaMikdash.
yes,
Ate it.
yes,
What
Tumah
did
in the
he
base of
eat?
Mikdash. Yes, right, right. Thank you. Tumah in the base of Mikdash. So we said, so the Brisa said that it's only you only bring a carbon where you knew it was wrong, and then you forgot, and then you were reminded. Okay. Talmud Lomar v'nelam shnei pamim. Divrei Rabbi Akiva, because the Torah says v'nelam twice. It says v'nelam v'yada v'nelam. It was, he forgot and he knew and he forgot, or he didn't know, he knew and he didn't know. Rabbi Omer, and I'm sorry, but Rabbi says you don't have to go that far. Rabbi Omer, vanilla mikol sheyada. It says vanilla means that you must have known. Vuhu yada. Um, and so when it says, and he knew, hare kan shtei yedios. So we're talking about two knowings, right? Im came out lomer vanellam. So, like, why does it say again that you forgot? To give you two responsibilities twice, right? Not only for forgetting that you were tame, but forgetting that you weren't supposed to go into the mikdash when you were tame. Okay, so there's two separate things that you bring a carbon for.
So he has to bring
Um,
two carbon. Is that Zichayev
yeah,
Shnei
right.
carbon?
Basically for one sequence of events, which is you came into the mikdash while you were tame. If it's because you A, didn't realize you were tame, and B, didn't realize that if you're tame, you don't go into the mikdash, then you bring two karbanos, one for each of those errors. Amar. So we said vanilla mikol shiyada. So this all revolves around the understanding that vanilla that you forgot or it was hidden or concealed from you means that you first that you knew, like you knew and forgot. You can't forget something that you didn't know. Okay, so if you forgot, it means that you already knew. My mashma. How do you arrive at that conclusion, like linguistically? Amarava mitloksi vihi aluma mimanu. It doesn't say that it was concealed from you. It's written actively. You forgot. If you forgot, it means you knew before. I'm like Abai says, wait a minute. El Miate got a sota. Regarding the sota, we also have the word vanilla. Dixi vanilla me'en Aisha. It was concealed from her husband that she had secluded herself with this other guy. Michlal Haviyada Meikara. So are you going to say that means that he initially knew about it? So what the Gemara is implying is if the man kept sleeping with his wife, even though he knew that she had been intimate with somebody else, then in that case, if that's what we're talking about, if he knew and then he was unsure, Ihavayada, if he knew Mibad Kulamaya, then the whole thing doesn't work. The May Sota, the Sota Wadras doesn't work. Um,
But also, it's an Isser if he's a Kohen, right? For instance.
Yes, right, right, exactly, because it's an Easter. Even if you're not a Kohen, you can't. If the man and the wife are married and the wife sleeps with somebody else, then she's forbidden to her husband, unless it's an accidental or rape or whatever. That may be different, but so we can't. That can't be what we're talking about here because that wouldn't be a sota case. Vatanya, because Bryce says v'nika ish me'avan v'isha tisa savana. When the Torah sums the whole thing up, it says the man is innocent, and the woman is the one who has to bear the sin. Okay, so the man is innocent means bisman sha'ish menuka me'avan ha'mayim bal kenes isha. This whole thing only works with the sota water if the man is innocent. In other words, he hasn't done anything wrong. Ein ha'ish menuka me'avan, but if he has, in other words, he's continued to live with her even though he knew that she was unfaithful. Ein ha'mayim bal kenes isha. Then sota thing doesn't even work. But two, and another, you want another proof about the meaning of the word vanel, Gabi Torah. It's written about the Torah in Eov. V'nelma me'enai kol chai u'me'of hashamayim nistera. Me'enei kol chai. The Torah was concealed from the eyes of every living thing and hidden from the birds. Michlal diika da havayadabe. So this implies like that, yeah, nobody understands the Torah completely, but so if you're saying that Vinelam means you knew it once and you forgot, so what are you saying? That there is a creature that does understand Torah completely? V'haksiv lo yada hasherka. No one knows it's the value, the full value of Torah. Elam Rabbi, so Rabbi says, Kasavar Rabbi Yediyah space Rabbo Shema Yediyah. There's an exception here because no, so there's an exception about, yes, when we say that the man, the guy who's tame goes into the mikdash, and he claims, and he says, I didn't know, or I didn't know that I was tame, or I didn't know I wasn't supposed to go into the mikdash when tame, right? It's not that you never knew, like maybe consciously you didn't know, but when you were in cheder, you knew, right? You must have been taught this. Everybody gets taught this, right? So you did know it at one time. So that's what we're talking about when we say, it was concealed from you. You forgot. You forgot what you learned when you were a kid. If Papa Labayes or if Papa said al diktane, anybody idea b'chila v'yesh b'yediyah b'sof. What about our Mishnah, which the Mishnah which talks about if you didn't know originally, but then you found out afterwards, miika deleisa b'yediyah space rabo. So what's that talking about? Ein bo yediyah b'chila. Everybody learns Torah when they're young, right? Amalei. So Bai says in. Yeah, you could find such a case. Yes, there are Jews who didn't go to day school. Yes, there are Jews that didn't go to cheder. And the classic example is, someone who was captured as a child or brought up, not by Jews, right? So that's the model for a Jewish child that was not taught everything as a child. Okay, and that's where we leave it with vanilla. Okay, non-hustle. Next, so our Mishnah says as follows: Yitzias Shabbos Shayim Shehin Arba. Now let's look at the.
I'm almost. I mean, the Gemara says elsewhere that everyone knew everything before they were born, right? So I was almost waiting for the Gemara to
For
bring
the
it out.
the Malach taught you everything in the womb, yeah.
Right. But the Gemara didn't go there.
No, but yeah, right. You can't get out of that one because you right. Although I guess you could say a ger, right? What about a ger? A ger didn't a ger that converted in adulthood, presumably did not have a childhood education, a Jewish education. So what about that? The Gemara could have answered that.
Yeah.
Okay. So Yitzias Shabbos Shayin Shenabra. The Mishnah said carrying on Shabbos. There's two types that really you can subdivide into four. It's non-Hasam. We have a Mishnah in Shabbos. Yitzias Shabbos Shaim Shein Arba Bifnim, Shaim Shein Arba B'chutz. Right? There are two which are really for regarding taking things from outside to inside, and another two which are for from inside to outside. Ma'ishna Hachad is the Tana Shaim Shein Arba V'tulo. So why in our Mishnah don't we further subdivide it like the Mishnah in Shabbos? The Mishnah is the Tani Shaim Shein Arba Bifnim. There in Shabbos we have more categories, as it were. So Gemara says Hasam the Ikar Shabbos who in the Mishnah in Shabbos where that's the point, right? Like the whole, that's where you expect to get into all the details in the Mishnah in Shabbos. Tani Avos told us. So then it wants to tell you about, split it further into Av Malacha and Tolda. But here it's just being mentioned as an aside as a tangent, Avos Tani v'Tolos Lotani. So it's not going to give you all the details. It's just talking about the Av Malacha, which you can only divide from two into four. Avos, mind you, what are the Av Malachos? Yitzios. What? There's only Hotzah, right? That's the Av Malacha. Yitzios Tarte Havyan. There's two cases of taking things out. Um, so so why two which are four? Like why bring into it the hachnasa, right part? V'chi tema mehen l'chiyuv mehen liftur. And so if you want to explain that what the Mishnah is trying to say is that for some of these actions you are liable and for some you're not. But wait a minute. It has to be parallel to the other things in the Mishnah. For example, the kinds of negaim, right, of tsaras things. It has to be parallel. Mahasam kulu l'chiyuva, afkan kulu l'chiyuva. There, in that clause in the Mishnah where it's talking about tsaras, it's talking about all things for which are tsaras, right? Different variations, but they're all tsaras. They're all on the same level. So why would you say for Shabbos that they're on a different level? Elam Rav Papa hasam de ikar Shabbos tani chivu p'turi. There in the Mishnah and Shabbos, where that's the main topic, that's where the Mishnah teaches you where you're chayav and where you are patur. Um, so, for example, where two people participate, one picks it up and the other puts it down in one rishus, and the other puts it down and the other shoots. That's the case which is potter. So that's how it's subdivided. But hacha chiyuv etani p'tur letani. Here, yeah, potter avolaser. Thank you, Charles. Not that you're permitted to do it, but that you're not liable for the penalty. And but here in our Mishnah in Shevuot, where that's not the main topic, so chiyuv etani p'tur lotani. Here it's only going to mention the things that for which you're actually chayav for. Chiyuv ma'ninu. What are we talking about? Yitzios, taking things out. Yitzios tartehu dehavim. But there's only two cases of taking out. If you don't include hachnasa, if you're only talking about taking from rishus hayachid into rishus harabim, then you can only there's only two cases there, right? So where you're standing in Rishus HaYachid and you put something outside, or vice versa. But if you're talking, but it would not be talking about Yitzios would not include Hachnosos, meaning bring it from Rishus HaRabim into Rishus HaYachid. So my answer is Shnaim Dotzo, Shnaim Dachnasa. There's two cases of taking out and two of bringing in. Vayitzios Knani. Well, what are you talking about? It's saying Yitzios HaShavos, right? It's not including Hachnosos. Ravashi Tana Hachnasa Nami Hotzah Karale. Yeah, linguistically, Hotzah includes both taking out and bringing in, right? You're taking it too literally. Don't take it literal. Don't understand Hotzah as only from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid. It means transferring, not taking out. Transferring would be a better translation. Transferring from one rishus to another. This is none. Here's an example from a Mishnah. Hamotzim rishus l'rishus chayav. If you move things from one domain to another, you're liable. Mila skina yule. Now that doesn't use the word hotzah there. Doesn't it mean that either from public to private or private to public? Either one, you're chayav. V'kakari hotzah, but it does say, hamotzi rishus l'shus. If you take out from one rishus to another, but clearly it's not talking about just from rishus hayachid to rishus harabim. It's not that kind of that's not what motzi means. Motzi means transferring from one to another, either way, either direction.
Well, there's always, even in that case, there's one person who's the giver and one the receiver. So you still have hachnasa, right?
Yeah, but it's also like the main case is one person is doing both, right? One person picks it up in one rishus and puts it down in the other rishus. That's the classic case of where you're liable. The
Mishnah that we're referring to initially in Masech Shabbos is referring to two people, right?
Well, that's one of the when it says like this is how you can divide it into separate cases. That's one of the cases. Yes, when there's two people.
And here we want to say it's one person. the
Well, yeah,
hotel.
the main case is one person, right? When the Torah says don't move things from one domain to another, the ordinary meaning of that is one person doing that. And then by when the Mishnah is saying is, Shtayim Shein Arba, you can subdivide that into, or you can expand that into more categories, and you get into these ideas. Excuse me. Get into these ideas of how you can, subdivide this into different kinds of cases. But the Gemara asks, "V'dilma kamaping mershusa yachid l'shusa rabim." Maybe Hamotzi really means taking out from private to public. Maybe that's really what it means, and don't interpret it as transferring from one to another. Interpret it as taking out from private to public. The answer is, then it would be more specific. It wouldn't say hamotzi mirshus l'rshus, which implies from one type of domain to another, which means either way. No, it would have, if it meant specifically from Rishus Yachid to Rishus Rabin, would have said so explicitly. My Rishus L'Rishus, when it says from one domain to another, even if you're bringing in from public to private, that's what it's talking about. But it still says hamotzi, so you still can see where the verb hamotzi can be translated as transferring rather than taking out.
Well,
The Tamamai.
that's part of the Mishnah, the Shnaim Shu Arba, right? We
Yeah,
were also given one of the one in that Mishnah that included from Rishuta Rabim to Rishuta Yachid as well, right?
yeah, right.
So
Well,
what?
that's no. Yeah, Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim, from private to public, that is clearly motzi, that is taking out. Because the idea is you're taking out from your
Oh,
private domain. But what we're saying is that don't translate it that way. It's not taking out, it's transferring. And transferring could be from the public to the private as well.
okay,
Um,
but that's and that's what the Mishnah included from the beginning of this, or the source from Masechta Shabbat that included that was Hachnasa essentially. That part of the transfer is Hachnasa. When it did include Shnaim She'arba, Shnaim She'arba is the
yeah,
include
but the Mishnah
Rishuta
in Shabbos
Rabim
said.
to Rishuta Yachid as well,
But
right?
the Mishnah in Shabbos referred to twice as many cases because it says Shnayim Shein Arba Bifnim, Shnayim Shein Arba B'chutz, right? So it's explicitly saying, explicitly referring to both domains.
Right, right.
Whereas our Mishnah is not as inclusive. um,
But our Mishnah is referencing that Mishnah.
how do you mean?
Well, when it brings it as one of the four examples, right, of Shnaim Shu Arba,
Yeah.
it
No, but the whole point is that it's not as expansive as the Mishnah and Shabbos. So generally we're saying, yeah, no kidding, because here we're not really talking about Shabbos. So we're using kind of a short, we're not getting into all the details. In the
oh,
Mishnah and Shabbos, then you're going to expand to all
right.
the possible variations.
Oh, so this is just a reference, but it's not going
Yeah,
into all the details.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly. Exactly. Kind of a
okay,
tangential reference, yes.
okay.
But Tamamai, so why do we use that verb hamotzi then? Like, isn't there another word you could use to indicate transfer? Don't use a word that one could mistake for being unidirectional. So the Gemara's answer is Tana kol akiris chayfetz mimkoma hotzah karlei. No, that's just the language. That's the Mishnaic language. Is when you say hamotzi means transferring. And Amar Rabina, how do I know that? Masnisi Namideki. You can also see that in the Mishnah in Shabbos. Tiktane Yitzias Shabbos Shaim Shein Arba Bifnim. Um, Yitzios, right? Transferring or taking out or transferring. There's two which are really four regarding bringing things inside, and two which are really four regarding taking things outside. The it's saying Yitzios HaShabbos, and it's talking about both taking out and bringing in. So
Oh,
clearly,
okay.
yeah, exactly. Shema Mina, so the more satisfied. Rav Amar. Rava has a different view of the word Yitzios HaShabbos. Rishuyos Katane. The Yitzios means the domains. Like Rishuyos Shabbos Shayim. There are two kinds of domains, right? So it's not that the act of taking things out. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the types of domains having to do with this malacha of hotzah. That's what it means. And so then you don't have the whole linguistic thing about, well, are you talking about taking from, from private to public or public to private? No, the meaning of Yitzios here is from one domain to another. So that solves the problem. Okay, so that's it for Shabbos. The next thing in the Mishnah was Maros Nagoyim
But in
Shnaim
this
Shein Arba.
case, we are talking when we're talking about different domains. The domains we're talking about are Rishut Yachid and Rishut
Yes. But we're saying the word
Rabim.
Yitzios doesn't mean the verb; it means the noun of property of domain types. Okay,
Right.
so it's just another. It's like one way of solving the problem is saying yitzios is a verb, but it means transferring, not taking out. So don't take it too literally. And the other way of approaching it, Rava's way, is it doesn't. It's not really. We're not talking about verbs. Yitzios is not a verb; it's a noun. When you say yitzios Shabbos, it means the domain types of Shabbos are. That's what our Mishnah means.
No, the question I ask is it refers to these two domains because we do talk there, and I'm not getting into all the details, but we also include a Carmelite, for example, which is
Oh yeah,
it's another
so
domain.
here I'm going to pull the Gemara's card and say we're only tangentially talking about Shabbos. You want to know about Carmelite, and first of all, that's only rabbinic, and so we'll study that in Shabbos, but not here.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so next thing in the Mishnah was Maris Nagoyim Shtayim Shem Arba. Things that, the different manifestations of Saras, there's two types which are really four. It's non Hasam. We have a Mishnah about Saras. Maris Nagoyim Shtayim Shem Arba, there are two which are four. The Mishnah explains, Baharis Aza Kashelag. You have the word Baharis, which means a very bright white, like snow. Shnia La Kasid. Then the next kind of shade of white is kasid hahechal, like the whitewash that was used in the hechal. Se'es ketsemer lavan. The next shade is called se'es, and that's like white wool. And shniala, and the secondary type of se'es is kikrum betza, the membrane of an egg. If you go to Sherwin-Williams, they'll try to sell you eggshell white, right? Okay, so that's Shaim Shein Arba. You have Baharis and Se'es. Baharis is two types of colors: bright white like snow and whitewash like in the Heichal, in the Mikdash. And you have Se'es, which is two subcategories. There's Se'es, which is like white wool, and Se'es, which is like what was the last thing again? Eggshell.
Eggshell. Right.
Yeah. Actually, it's egg membrane, so I'm not sure if it means the shell, but whatever. I'm just going to call it eggshell because it reminds me of Sherwin-Williams. I'm Rabbi Chanina. Man Tana Mars Nagaim. Who's Tana? Who's the Tana that is talking about all this? Zelo Rabbi Akiva. I'm going to say it's not like Rabbi Akiva. The Rabbi Akiva. What did Rabbi Akiva say? Kevin the Yamar Zula Mal Mizu Zula Mal Mizu. Since Rabbi Akiva says that the colors kind of line up in order, like the Gemara will show that Rabbi Akiva, how bright is the white? The most bright is the snow, and then the next less bright is the whitewash, and then the what's the third one again?
Eggshell.
White wool and then eggshell.
Oh,
Okay. Um, so that's the kind of the grades of brightness. Then the you can't combine. Okay, what we're talking about is if you have to have a minimum size of this saras, right? So can you combine two different shades to make that minimum? All right. So now if they're listed in order, then the whitewash category can't combine with those on either side of it. Bahani man litzarfe. Which one is it supposed to combine with? Litzarfe bahani bahares. If you want to combine it with its main category, which is the brightest, which is bright like snow, ikase stadifaminai. There's there is Seis. So okay, sorry. 1 second. Um, I've got it backwards. Um, 1 second. Okay, yes. So look at the avos, look at the main categories. You have Baharis, which is the brightest, and then Seis, which is the wool, which is less bright. Now, if the whitewash is a subcategory of snow, right, then um then
What does that mean? Subcategory of snow. Isn't that one of the
it's
colors?
in the bright in terms of it brightness. Well, what the mission was saying was you have two main categories of white. You have Baharis, which is snow white, and Seis, which is wool white. Okay. And then there are subcategories like, a little bit less bright than snow is a subcategory of snow is the whitewash, and the subcategory of wool is the eggshell color. Okay. Um, if 1 second. And we're saying that um Rabbi Akiva holds that the if you go from brightest to least bright, then the order is snow, wool, lime, and eggshell, or whitewash and eggshell. Okay, so that means that the whitewash does not come in brightness between the two avos, between the snow white and the wool white. It comes after the wool white. It is less bright than the wool. So, um, and Rabbi Akiva holds that if you're combining shades to make the minimum saras, area of saras, you have to combine them in like order of brightness. You can't skip a level. Okay, that wouldn't work to combine. Okay, so how would you combine the whitewash color with anything? You can't. What would it combine with? Litzarfe bahadi bahares.
But the
And
Beharat, we said that's the Beharat and Sage, right? So those are the prime categories. And beneath the Beharat is the Sid, right? Isn't that associated with the
yeah,
Beharat
that's a subcategory or a variation, if you will, of bahares. Right.
and the subcategory of Sate is the eggshell, right?
Right. Right. So how can you combine the whitewash with anything? You can't. You should really combine it with Baharis, with its mate, right? With the Snow White, but it skips a level in brightness, right? It is according to Rabbi Akiva, you can only combine things that are next to each other on the brightness scale, but that's not the case with snow and whitewash. Um, on the other hand, um, you can't match it with the the things that are next to it on the brightness scale because they're part of a different of, right? The whitewash is a tolda of the Baharis, of the Snow White, the brightest, but it sits in brightness between the two things that are belong to the other category, the wool and the eggshell. So you could never combine it with anything because according to Rabbi Akiva, you have to have both of those things. It has to combine with something in its own category, Baharis, and also with the thing that is closest to it in brightness, which is not Baharis. So what are you going to combine it with? Um, Mm, so,
So you say it doesn't have to.
what's it going to combine with? Lisarfe, by Bahade Baharas, you want to combine it with its mate, with the Snow White, Ikos a Stadifaminae, but it's not next to it on the color chart, right? It's next to Seis, and you want to Lisarfe by the Seis, but you can't combine either with the Seis with the wool white. Love told the Didehu because it's not part of that category. So Gemara says, well, wait a minute. Yache, if that's what you want to say about Rabbi Akiva, Krumbetza Name Bahade Manli Tzarfe. Then you could say the same thing about the eggshell. The eggshell is next to the whitewash on the color chart, but it's not from the same category, right? So you could say the same thing about that. Tzarfe, but they say is connect it to or let it join together with the wool white Ika sida adif minay. But wait a minute, but it's closer in shade to the other one, to the whitewash. So everybody say seed, and you want to combine it with the whitewash, la bar minay. You could say the same thing there. Whereas it's high. What kind of a comparison is that? Bishlama below seed, Heichal, Krum Beit Solokasha. Without the problem of the whitewash, the eggshell doesn't have a problem. The afagav the Krum Beitza mitai mitatai disace, even though the eggshell is removed by 2 degrees from the seis, from its main category. Rahman Amar v'laseis v'lasapachas, sapachas tefila laseis. And the Torah has a separate pasuk that says this is the laws for seis and sapachas. It shows that a sapachas is less than or is under the umbrella of a seis. Avagav de minachta mine tuva, even though it's removed from it on the color chart, it's not close to it on the color chart, still the Torah puts them together. But you can't say that about the whitewash thing, right? So Ella machmarta masnisin lo Rabbi Akiva. So the whitewash is what shows us that the Mishnah can't be like Rabbi Akiva. But Rabbi Akiva could accept that the wool and the eggshell could go together, even though they're not next to each other on the color chart, because the Torah has a separate pasuk that includes that.
How would we bring in the sapachat now?
That was one of the categories, right?
No, the
Gemara
categories are Be'eret and Seid. Where does sapachat come in here?
Yes, good question.
All of a sudden, out of left field, we have sapachat here.
Yeah. Um, So sapachas apparently means any subsidiary shade. It's not a particular category. It means a lighter colored nega, a lighter colored skin color. So um, so when the Torah says v'la se'es, v'la sapachas, it means se'es, which is one of those color categories, and anything beneath it. Right, so it doesn't have to be. So Rabbi Akiva generally would hold that it has to be next to it on the color chart, but in the case of se'es, that's not a requirement. But in the case of the first one, of the first category, which is baharas, it is a requirement. So that's why the only thing that doesn't fit into Rabbi Akiva's conception here is the whitewash, because that is both part of the Baharas, but also removed in color shade from the Baharas. Okay, so that's a contradiction. You can't ever have that. Like there's nowhere for it to go. Whereas the problem of the eggshell is not so severe, because even though it is a subset or related to the se'es, the fact that it is removed from se'es on the color chart is not a problem, because the Torah specifically allows that by saying v'la se'es v'la sapachas. The se'es or any color shade underneath it. Okay,
So
and we
that
will
could
stop
be.
here for today.
Oh, but that only applies to the Beharit, right? Because, for instance, we couldn't even combine the eggshell with the Beharit. We couldn't combine anything with it. It has to be right next to it, right?
Right,
It
exactly.
has to be something that's right next to
Right
it.
next to it and part of its category. And there is no such, and yeah, there is no other shade, like there is no shade like that. So that's why we're saying this can't be like Rabbi Akiva.
And that's the
Okay,
way he holds.
yeah. Well, we'll call it here for today, and David will pick up again tomorrow.
It's a little bit,
That was fun.
yeah, it's a little esoteric, but
Yeah, that's true too. All right, have a good day, everybody.
okay.